Christmas is always sold as a perfect night, a united family, gifts, toasts, and smiles for the photo. But the reality is that behind many Christmas tables there are fights, secrets, guilt, and people on the verge of exploding. Alcohol, old grudges that resurface, neighbors who disappear without explanation, and tragedies that forever mark a date that is supposed to be happy. Today, I'm going to tell you 5 Christmas horror stories where that magical night becomes the worst night of their lives. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and how Christmas is celebrated in your country. Now, without further ado, let's begin. My name is Miguel Alvarez, 42 years old, divorced, a literature teacher at a high school in Cuernavaca. I was always the rational one in the family, the skeptic, the one who looked for logical explanations for everything. But what happened last Christmas at my brother Roberto's house destroyed that part of me forever. It all began with an invitation I didn't want to accept. Roberto and I had been estranged since our parents' death 3 years earlier. Disagreements over the inheritance, old resentments, the typical things that destroy families. However, his call sounded sincere. "It's Christmas, Miguel. It's time to leave the past behind. Come with us. The kids are asking about their uncle." I accepted more out of loneliness than reconciliation. My empty apartment and the memory of yet another Christmas drinking alone pushed me to his house on the outskirts of Tepoztlan, a beautiful but isolated property that our father had left to him, the main reason for our falling out. I arrived on the afternoon of December 24th with a sack full of gifts for my nephews, Emiliano, 7, and Lucia, 5. The house was magnificently decorated. A 3-meter natural pine tree dominated the main living room. Lights, ornaments, and porcelain figurines everywhere. The nativity scene took up an entire side table. Isabel, Roberto's wife, had always been a perfectionist with decoration. Dinner went better than expected. Roberto seemed genuinely interested in my life. The kids were excited by my presence. Isabel had prepared bacalao a la vizcaína, romeritos, and roast pork leg. Tequila and wine flowed generously. Near midnight, Roberto proposed a toast. "To the family reunited again, and to all those who are no longer with us." We clinked glasses with a certain melancholy. That was when Emiliano mentioned something strange. "Uncle Miguel, are you going to sleep in the corner room? That's where the sad lady appears." Isabel immediately scolded him. "Emiliano, don't say nonsense. You know that's just your imagination." Roberto quickly changed the subject, but I noticed a sudden tension on his face. Later, while he was showing me that very room, I tried to joke about the comment. "So I'll have ghostly company tonight." Roberto didn't smile. "They're kids' things. Ever since we bought that old bed at the antiques market, Emiliano says he sees a woman crying by the window. Just nightmares." He showed me the bathroom, gave me clean towels, and left me alone. The room was cozy but cold despite the heating. A small balcony overlooked the back garden and the nearby forest. The bed in question was an impressive colonial piece with a carved headboard and posts darkened by time. Exhausted from the trip and drowsy from the alcohol, I fell asleep quickly. I awoke startled at 3:42 a.m., according to the digital clock on the nightstand. A soft crying was coming from the balcony. I immediately thought of the kids. Perhaps Lucia had come in looking for her parents. I got up and turned the lamp. There was no one in the room, but the crying continued. The balcony doors were ajar, letting in the cold air of December. I was sure I had closed them before going to bed. I stepped out onto the balcony. The garden was dimly lit by the moon. A female figure stood with her back turned about 20 meters away, next to the old oak tree. She seemed to be wearing a long white dress. Her black hair fell to her waist. "Isabel?" I called, confused. The figure did not respond or move. I hurried downstairs wearing the robe I had brought. The cold hit me as I crossed the garden. When I got closer, the figure was gone. I searched the entire perimeter without finding anything and returned to the house bewildered. In the kitchen, I found Roberto sitting in the shadows with a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Did you see her?" he asked without looking at me. "I saw someone in the garden. I thought it was Isabel." "Isabel is asleep. The kids, too." He took a long drink. "It's her, the woman from the bed." I sat across from him, both intrigued and annoyed by what seemed to be an elaborate joke. "What are you talking about?" "We bought the bed 6 months ago from an antique dealer in Tepoztlan. The owner told us it belonged to a family from Puebla. After that, the apparitions started. First, only Emiliano saw her, then Lucia, then Isabel. Now I see her too." "Roberto, ghosts don't exist." "I investigated the history of the bed," he continued as if I hadn't heard him. "It belonged to a woman named Carmen Aguirre. She committed suicide on Christmas Eve in 1942 after her husband abandoned her. She hung herself from one of the posts of that same bed." "Coincidences and suggestion," I replied. "Old furniture inspires that kind of story." Roberto smiled sadly. "That's what I thought too, the rational one, like you." We returned to our rooms after an uncomfortable silence. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, the excited screams of the kids opening their gifts pulled me from the uneasy stupor I was in. Christmas Day passed with apparent normality. We had tamales and hot chocolate for breakfast. We opened presents. The kids played with their new toys. Isabel and Roberto seemed tense but cordial. No one mentioned the events of the night. Late in the afternoon, while the kids watched a Christmas movie, Roberto asked me to help him look for more firewood in the back shed. Once there, he closed the door. "I need you to take the bed," he said without preamble. "What? Why me?" "Because ever since it arrived, everything has gotten worse. Isabel has terrible nightmares. The kids are scared. And he stopped, rubbing his face. "I'm hearing voices. Miguel, it tells me things, horrible things." "You need professional help, Roberto, not exorcisms." "Take the bed. It's yours. I'll include it as part of your inheritance. Just get it out of my house." I finally agreed, more to calm him than because I believed his ravings. We agreed that I would pick it up the following weekend with a truck. That night, the atmosphere at dinner was heavy and silent. The kids went to bed early. Isabel barely spoke. Roberto drank too much. I went to my room around 11, emotionally exhausted. I awoke again in the early morning, 3:42 a.m., exactly the same time. This time, the figure was inside the bed. A pale face, dark under-eyes, and dark marks on her neck. She didn't move. She just stared at me. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't respond. An unnatural cold filled the room. The figure slowly approached until she was beside my head. Her face leaned toward mine. She whispered something I couldn't fully understand, something about complete and family. The scream I finally managed to let out must have woken the whole house. I quickly heard footsteps in the hallway. Roberto came in first, followed by Isabel. The figure had...
My name is Elena Morales. I am 34 years old and work as an editor for a digital magazine. This year I decided to spend the holidays alone in my apartment in Mexico City, even though my family insisted that I fly to Merida to be with them. The holidays shouldn't be spent alone, my mother kept repeating over the phone. But after an exhausting year and a recent breakup with Alejandro, I needed space, silence, and time for myself. Now, as I write this with trembling hands from a hotel room, I understand that I should have listened to them. It all began on December 15th. I had placed a small Christmas tree next to my living room window and hung lights on the balcony. Nothing extraordinary, but enough to make me feel part of the season. That night, when I returned from the office, I noticed something strange. My coffee mug was not where I had left it that morning. I was sure I had left it by the sink, but now it was on the drying rack, perfectly clean. I attributed it to exhaustion or a mental lapse. "Are you losing your mind, Elena?" I told myself as I prepared dinner. But the feeling persisted, the uncomfortable certainty that something wasn't right. 3 days later, I found a wrapped present under my tree, a small package with red paper and a gold bow, no card and no sender. I didn't remember putting it there. My friends had a habit of leaving gifts for one another, so I assumed someone had stopped by while I was at work. Maybe Daniela, my neighbor, who had an emergency key. I sent her a message. "Thanks for the Christmas gift." Her reply made my blood run cold. What gift? When I explained, her confusion seemed genuine. She hadn't been in my apartment for weeks. Unease turned into fear. I checked the locks on the doors and windows. Everything seemed fine. Still, I decided not to open the gift. That night, sitting on my couch watching a Christmas movie, I heard a creak coming from my bedroom, the kind of sound the floor makes when someone walks quietly. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my phone, ready to call emergency services. "Is someone there?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Silence. After several minutes, I gathered the courage to investigate. My bedroom was empty, just like the rest of the apartment. I checked under the bed, inside the closet, behind the curtains. Nothing. I convinced myself it had been my imagination, perhaps the building settling or a neighbor. I decided to put the mysterious gift in a bag and throw it away in the building's trash container. As I did, I couldn't help but notice how light it was, as if it were empty. For a moment, curiosity almost made me open it, but something primitive, an instinct for self-preservation, stopped me. I threw it away without looking back. The next morning was Sunday. I woke up late, enjoying the warmth of my blankets while it lightly rained outside. The peace lasted exactly 3 minutes. When I opened my eyes, I saw something on my dresser that made me hold my breath. The same gift with the red paper and gold bow. I ran out of the apartment in my pajamas, barely stopping to grab my phone and keys. In the hallway, I ran into Mr. Velasco, a retired neighbor with whom I occasionally exchanged greetings. "Are you all right, Miss Elena? You look pale." With a shaky voice, I explained what was happening. He offered to check my apartment with me. We didn't find anyone, but Mr. Velasco noticed something I had overlooked, a small mark on the balcony window frame, as if someone had forced the lock. We called the police. When they arrived, they took my information and examined the apartment. Their conclusion: someone had been coming in, probably for days or even weeks. They advised me to change the locks, install security cameras, and stay with a family member while the investigation continued. I kept the gift as evidence. That afternoon, I installed 2 security cameras connected to my phone and changed all the locks. The locksmith, a middle-aged man named Gustavo, looked at me with genuine concern. "Miss, these old locks are very easy to open. Anyone with a little practice could do it without leaving marks," as he installed the new mechanisms. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound, every creak made me jump. I constantly checked the camera feeds on my phone. At 3:17 a.m., the camera app alerted me to movement. With trembling fingers, I opened the notification. The image took my breath away. A dark figure was standing in my living room, staring directly at the camera. He was wearing a simple white mask, almost like a theater mask. He was inside my apartment, less than 10 meters from where I was. I called 911 in complete silence, whispering my emergency. The operator told me to lock myself in the bathroom and wait for the police. With the phone pressed to my ear, I slid out of bed and crossed the dark hallway, praying the intruder wouldn't hear me. That's when I saw him at the end of the hallway, tall, motionless, the white mask faintly reflecting the Christmas lights coming through the window. In his hand he was holding something, the red gift. I stood frozen, unable to move or scream. "Elena," he whispered hoarsely, "open your gift." I recognized the voice immediately, despite the whisper. Alejandro, my ex, the N I had broken up with 3 months earlier, after discovering his obsessive calls and messages to my younger sister. I ran into the bathroom and shut the door, but it had no lock. I pushed the sink cabinet against it and curled up in the bathtub as I heard his footsteps slowly approaching. "I just want you to see what I brought you," he insisted while pushing the door. The cabinet began to give way. "Open it,"
he demanded, his voice shifting between pleading and threatening. That's when I heard the sirens. Alejandro heard them too. The pressure against the door stopped. I heard his hurried footsteps, the sound of the balcony window opening, and then silence. When the police entered my apartment, they found the gift lying in the hallway. This time we opened it. Inside was a small bottle of perfume and a note, so you'll always smell the way I remember you. The bottle contained a clear liquid that, according to later analysis, was a mixture of water and Alejandro's bodily fluids. The horror didn't end there. The investigation revealed that Alejandro had been entering my apartment for weeks while I was at work. He had used the key I once gave him and never asked back for. He had found hidden cameras in my bedroom and bathroom connected to his phone. He had been watching me, sleeping in my bed when I wasn't there, using my things, even tasting my food. The worst discovery was his diary, found in his apartment during the search. He had meticulously recorded every one of my movements for months. He knew my schedules, my habits, my phone conversations. The last pages detailed his Christmas plan, to kidnap me on Christmas Eve and take me to a cabin outside the city that he had rented under a false name. 2 weeks.
My name is Ernesto Rodriguez. I am 43 years old, and until recently, I was a middle school teacher in Puebla. I never believed I could become the monster that now lives in my own skin. Before, Christmas meant hope and family. Now it only reminds me of the night I lost everything, including myself. A year ago, my wife Teresa, my children Emilio and Sofia, both 18, and I lived in a modest house on the outskirts of the city. We weren't rich, but we had enough. Every December we decorated with colorful lights, set up the nativity scene, and had dinner together on the 24th. That was our tradition. My brother-in-law, Roberto, usually joined us. He was Teresa's younger brother, a businessman with too much money and very little scruple. He always arrived with ostentatious gifts that made ours seem insignificant. "It's just a little something," he would say, as my children unwrapped tablets or game consoles that would have taken me months to afford. Teresa was bothered by it, but she tolerated these eccentricities, because after all, he was her only brother. The year before, things at school were not going well. For months the union had been negotiating better conditions, and our salaries had been withheld for weeks. We had some savings, but Christmas had almost completely consumed them. Roberto knew it. Everyone knew it. On December 23rd, I received a call from him. "Hey, brother-in-law, can you come to my apartment this afternoon? I want to show you something before tomorrow's dinner." I agreed reluctantly. His apartment was in the exclusive Angelopolis area, 40 minutes from our house. When I arrived, he greeted me with a double whiskey that I didn't dare refuse.
"Ernesto, I've been thinking about your situation," he began, emphasizing situation, the way one talks about a terminal illness. "I know things are tough with the school." I felt my cheeks burn, my pride wounded. "We're fine, Roberto." Of course," he said, with a condescending smile. "But I want to propose something to you. I have a partner who needs a special favor tomorrow, something discreet, no questions. Just pick up a package and deliver it. 5 minutes of work, 30,000 pesos. The equivalent of 3 months of my salary for a simple errand. I knew perfectly well what kind of favors Roberto and his partners dealt in. Influence peddling, fake invoices, and worse things I preferred not to know. "I can't do that," I replied. "You know I can't. Come on, Ernesto. Don't you want to see your kids' faces when they open their presents, or would you rather explain why Santa was so stingy this year?" That comment hit where it hurt most. That night, when I returned home, I found Sophia writing her letter to Santa, asking for a pink bicycle that cost more than we had. Emilio wanted a video game console. Teresa had baked cookies and was preparing the next day's dinner with what little we had. I didn't sleep. I thought about those 30,000 pesos, about my children's disappointed faces, about Roberto showing up with his pretentious gifts while I handed out socks and used books. The next morning I called that number. The voice on the other end was clear. "Parking lot of the Gallerias Mall, 6 p.m. Look for a black Jetta. Pick up a briefcase. Take it to La Noria restaurant by 7. Ask for Joaquin. Don't look inside. No questions." I spent the day helping with Christmas preparations while my stomach burned with nerves. At 5:30, I told Teresa I had forgotten to buy her gift, a small lie that would begin an irreparable chain. The parking lot was almost empty. Christmas Eve, families having dinner, me picking up a black briefcase that weighed far too heavy to contain documents. I didn't look inside. I didn't ask questions. When I arrived at La Noria restaurant, I asked for Joaquin. The waiter led me to a private room in the back. 2 men were waiting, one thin with a receding hairline and piercing eyes, the other stocky with hands like hams resting on the table. "Did you bring what's mine?" the thin one asked. I handed him the briefcase. He checked the contents and smiled. "Perfect. Carlos will give you yours." The stocky man pulled out an envelope, 30,000 pesos. When I reached for it, he asked, "Did you know what you just did?" "I'd rather not know." "You just delivered 2 kilos of pure cocaine. Merry Christmas." I staggered out to the car and vomited onto the steering wheel. 2 kilos, enough for a 10-year sentence. They had turned me into a drug trafficker for 30,000 pesos. I drove home on autopilot. The Christmas lights now looked like mocking luminous sneers. When I arrived, I forced a smile. Dinner went on like a badly acted play. Roberto arrived with his extravagant gifts. I had an envelope of money stained with invisible blood. After dinner, while Teresa put the children to bed, Roberto found me in the kitchen. "All good, Professor?" His mocking tone churned my stomach. "Why didn't you tell me what it was?" "Because you wouldn't have accepted. But hey, it's done now. Congratulations. You just earned more in an hour than in a month teaching equations. I don't want to be involved in this. It was a mistake. Unfortunately, you already are. Joaquin was impressed with your discretion. He wants you to work for him regularly." "What? No, it was a one-time thing, just for Christmas." Roberto smiled. "That's not how it works, Ernesto. Once you're in, you don't get out. But don't worry, it's good money." "I'm not interested. Tell him no. Think about it, or I'll have to explain that the moral and ethics teacher doesn't have the stomach after all. Joaquin doesn't like disappointments or loose ends." The threat hung between us. Roberto left shortly after, leaving me with a cold terror that no fireplace could warm. That night I couldn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, someone knocked on the door. When I opened it, I found the stocky man from the restaurant, Carlos. "Joaquin needs you now. It's Christmas, my family. Joaquin needs you now." I looked toward the bedroom where Teresa and the kids were sleeping. "Give me a minute." I dressed silently. I kissed Teresa on the forehead without waking her. I peeked into the children's room. Their Christmas stockings hung beside their beds, full of candy and small toys bought with dirty money. Carlos drove me to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Inside, Joaquin was waiting next to a man kneeling on the floor, his face disfigured by blows, his hands tied. "Ernesto, we have a problem. This gentleman tried to steal from us. Roberto says you're trustworthy." Joaquin extended a gun to me.
My name is Elena Fuentes. I am 34 years old, and until 3 months ago I worked as an editor at a design magazine in Mexico City. Now I am writing this from a room in a psychiatric hospital, where I have been hospitalized since December 26th. The doctors say that writing may help me process what happened that Christmas Eve at my parents' house. I'm not sure I want to remember it, but I can't keep pretending it didn't happen either. I've always had a complicated relationship with the Christmas holidays. For my family, especially for my mother, Estella, Christmas was sacred. The perfect tree, an elaborate dinner, carefully wrapped gifts. Everything had to look like it did in the movies. But behind that facade of perfection, there were tensions no one ever mentioned. My brother Carlos and his alcoholism, the emotional distance between my parents, my own social anxiety that worsened every year. This December was different. After 5 years of avoiding family gatherings with work-related excuses, I decided to return to Cuernavaca. My therapist insisted that confronting my family was necessary for my healing process. Also, my father had suffered a mild heart attack in September, and although he was recovering well, the sudden fragility of someone who had always seemed indestructible made me reconsider my priorities. I arrived on December 23rd. The house looked the same as always. The enormous natural pine tree decorated with red and gold ornaments, the meticulously assembled nativity scene, multicolored lights framing windows and doors. My mother greeted me with a tense hug, as if she were embracing a stranger who merely resembled her daughter. "Your brother will arrive tomorrow with Daniela and the kids," she said, as she showed me my old bedroom, now converted into a guest room. "Your father is resting. The medication leaves him exhausted." That night, while going through old family photo albums, I found photographs I didn't remember. In several of them, I appeared next to a girl about my age. She had dark hair and a peculiar smile, with slightly crooked front teeth. "Who is she?" I asked my mother, pointing at the photo. She visibly stiffened. "Luciana Herrera. She lived next door when we had the house in Tepoztlan. Don't you remember? You only played together for one summer before they moved away." Something in her tone unsettled me, but I didn't press the issue. Later, when my father awoke, I noticed how distant he seemed. He hugged me mechanically, and his eyes didn't quite focus on me. "It's good that you came," he said, without emotion. "Your mother needs help with all this." Christmas Eve began as a tense but manageable day. I helped my mother with dinner, while she subtly criticized everything I did. How I chopped the vegetables, how I set the table, my decision not to wear makeup. Carlos arrived in the afternoon with his wife and his 7-year-old twins. He seemed sober and cheerful, though I noticed his hand trembling as he poured himself a glass of water. During dinner, the conversation was awkwardly polite. We talked about Carlos's job, the children, local politics, but there was something strange in the air. My mother kept casting nervous glances toward the door, as if expecting someone else. My father barely ate, just moving the food around on his plate. The children were unusually quiet. When dessert was served, Teresa, the old housekeeper who had worked for my parents since I was a child, placed an extra plate on the table next to me. "Who is that plate for?" I asked, puzzled. A heavy silence fell over the table. My mother looked at my father in panic. Carlos dropped his fork, which clattered against the porcelain. "It's for Luciana," one of my nephews said naturally. "Grandma always sets a plate for Luciana at Christmas." "Miguel, don't talk about that," Carlos snapped sharply. "Why not?" the boy insisted. "You said Aunt Elena knew about Luciana." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What am I supposed to know about her?" My mother abruptly stood up and left the dining room. My father looked me directly in the eyes for the first time. "I think it's time to talk about certain things, Elena. We weren't sure whether you remembered. The doctors said you had probably blocked everything that happened." "What doctors? What are you talking about?" Carlos intervened. "Luciana Herrera was your best friend when we had the house in Tepoztlan. You were 8 years old. That Christmas, the two of you—" "Enough," my father cut him off. "We need to talk about this in private." The children were sent to watch television. Daniela excused herself to go with them. The three of us, my father, Carlos, and I, went into the study. My mother remained absent. What I heard over the next hour shattered the foundations of everything I believed about my life. Luciana and I had been inseparable that summer. According to Carlos, I changed when I was with her. I became defiant, reckless. My parents disapproved of the friendship because the Herrera family was considered problematic, but we found ways to see each other anyway. This December, after dinner, we slipped away into the nearby woods. According to the later investigation, we played near the ravine that bordered the property. I returned alone, covered in mud and with a vacant stare. Luciana never came back. Her body was found 3 days later at the bottom of the ravine. You said she had fallen, my father explained in a broken voice, but there were marks. The investigators questioned whether she might have been pushed. You were a child. You were 8 years old. They couldn't fully grasp the seriousness of their insinuations. Are you telling me you think I pushed a girl off a ravine? I asked, incredulous. No, Carlos replied. The experts determined it was an accident. But you stopped speaking for months afterwards. Then, apparently, you forgot everything about Luciana. The psychologists said it was a defense mechanism, and we shouldn't force you to remember. My head was spinning. Fragments of memories began to surface. A sharp laugh, a challenge, the cold night wind, a scream suddenly cut short. I stood up unsteadily. I need air, I murmured. Without waiting for an answer, I went out into the backyard. The night was cold and clear, illuminated by a nearly full moon. That was when I saw her, sitting on the swing my father had installed years ago. A dark-haired girl staring straight at me. Her front teeth were slightly crooked when she smiled. "Merry Christmas, Elena," she said, in a voice I recognized instantly. "Do you want to play like before?" I screamed, or so they told me afterwards. What I remember next are only confused fragments. Carlos holding me while I clawed at the air, my mother crying, an ambulance, sedatives. The doctors say I suffered a psychotic break triggered by stress and the traumatic revelation. They say the girl I saw was a projection of my repressed guilt. I am undergoing treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder and dissociative episodes. But there is something I haven't told them, something I barely dare admit to myself. The night before Christmas Eve, while going through my old belongings in the attic, I found a small box hidden inside my childhood teddy bear. Inside was a baby tooth and a lock of dark hair tied with a red ribbon. At the bottom of the box, written in the trembling handwriting of a child, was a note. "Now you will be only mine forever." I don't know if I pushed Luciana 26 years ago. I don't know if the girl on the swing was real or a hallucination. What I do know is that when I saw her, I didn't feel fear.
My name is David Morales, and until 3 weeks ago, I had a perfectly normal life. A job as an accountant at a respectable firm, a comfortable apartment in the downtown area, plans for the future. Now, I'm writing this from a room in a psychiatric hospital, my wrists bandaged and my mind shattered into pieces that no one, not even I, can put back together. It all began with an invitation I should never have accepted.
15 years ago, I distanced myself from my family and my hometown, San Miguel del Monte, a small place in the mountains where everyone knows everyone. I left after a brutal argument with my father, promising never to return. For years, I kept only minimal contact with my mother and my younger sister, Elena, through sporadic phone calls. This year, however, Elena insisted that I come back for Christmas. Our father had died in March, and according to her, it was time to heal wounds and be together as a family. I agreed more out of guilt than desire. On December 23rd, I packed gifts, clothes for 4 days, and took the road to the town. As I drove along that winding road through pine forests, I felt something inside me tighten. Memories I had buried began to stir, as if something were awakening them. The family house was the same as ever, an old 2-story building with a gabled roof and a worn porch. My mother greeted me with a hug that I returned awkwardly. At her age, she looked much older than she should have. Elena, her husband Carlos, and their 7-year-old twins arrived shortly afterward. The house filled with familiar noise, Christmas preparations, and the smell of punch and tamales. That first night after dinner, Elena assigned me my old bedroom. We left it just the way it was, David. Dad never allowed us to touch it. A shiver ran down my spine. I didn't want to sleep surrounded by my teenage things, but insisting on staying at a hotel would have been an unforgivable slight. When I opened the door, the past hit me like a physical slap. Everything was exactly the same. The rock band posters, the Stephen King book collection, the old computer on the desk. I sat on the bed and felt the mattress sink in the same places where my teenage body had left its mark. Under the pillow, my diary was still there. I opened it, and my shaky 17-year-old handwriting immediately transported me back to those Christmases my mind had blocked out. December 24th. He will come again tonight. I heard him talking to Mom. He said we have unfinished business. I'm scared. I can't take it anymore. I slammed the diary shut. The memories I had buried began to seep through. My father entering my room on Christmas Eve, drunk with that dangerous gleam in his eyes. "It's our Christmas secret," he whispered as he sat on my bed. "If you talk, you'll destroy this family." Year after year, since I turned 12, I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bile. When I returned to the room, I looked out the window and saw something impossible. A male figure in the backyard staring at my window, the unmistakable silhouette of my father. I stumbled down the stairs, convinced my mind was playing a macabre trick on me. In the kitchen, I found my mother preparing dough for the bread she would bake the next day. "Are you okay, son? You look pale," she asked, without looking up from the dough. "I saw, or I thought I saw, someone in the yard. He looked like Dad." Her hands stopped. "It's normal," she finally said. "At this time of year, his presence feels stronger." "Mom, I need to ask you something. Did you know what Dad—" She cut me off abruptly. "Your father was a good man, David. He had his problems like everyone, but he loved us in his own way." "In his own way. That's how you justify what he did to me."
My mother looked at me with empty eyes. "Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. Your father always said that at Christmas the family must remain united, stay silent about what hurts, and move on. That's what we've always done." That night I couldn't sleep. At 3 in the morning I heard the children whispering in the hallway. I peeked out and saw the twins, Martine and Manuel, talking in front of the door to the study that had belonged to my father. "What are you doing awake?" I asked. They jumped. "We're waiting for grandfather to come out," Martine said. "Mom says he always comes at Christmas to leave us special presents." "Grandfather is dead," I replied, more harshly than I intended. Manuel shook his head. "No, Uncle, we saw him last night. He came through our bedroom window. He said we had to keep a secret." Horror froze me in place. What secret? The boys exchanged glances and lowered their voices. They showed us how good children are supposed to behave at Christmas. He said that if we told anyone, Santa would never come again. I felt the ground vanish beneath my feet. The story was repeating itself horribly. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bile. When I returned to the room, I looked out the window and saw something impossible. A male figure in the backyard staring at my window, the unmistakable silhouette of my father. I stumbled down the stairs, convinced my mind was playing a macabre trick on me. In the kitchen, I found my mother preparing dough for the bread she would bake the next day. "Are you okay, son? You look pale," she asked, without looking up from the dough. "I saw, or I thought I saw, someone in the yard. He looked like Dad." Her hands stopped. "It's normal," she finally said. "At this time of year, his presence feels stronger." "Mom, I need to ask you something. Did you know what Dad—" She cut me off abruptly. "Your father was a good man, David. He had his problems like everyone, but he loved us in his own way." "In his own way. That's how you justify what he did to me." My mother looked at me with empty eyes. "Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. Your father always said that at Christmas the family must remain united, stay silent about what hurts, and move on. That's what we've always done." That night I couldn't sleep. At 3 in the morning I heard the children whispering in the hallway. I peeked out and saw the twins, Martine and Manuel, talking in front of the door to the study that had belonged to my father. "What are you doing awake?" I asked. They jumped. "We're waiting for grandfather to come out," Martine said. "Mom says he always comes at Christmas to leave us special presents." "Grandfather is dead," I replied, more harshly than I intended. Manuel shook his head. "No, Uncle, we saw him last night. He came through our bedroom window. He said we had to keep a secret." Horror froze me in place. What secret? The boys exchanged glances and lowered their voices. They showed us how good children are supposed to behave at Christmas. He said that if we told anyone, Santa would never come again. I felt the ground vanish beneath my feet. The story was repeating itself horribly. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bile. When I returned to the room, I looked out the window and saw something impossible. A male figure in the backyard staring at my window, the unmistakable silhouette of my father. I stumbled down the stairs, convinced my mind was playing a macabre trick on me. In the kitchen, I found my mother preparing dough for the bread she would bake the next day. "Are you okay, son? You look pale."